I believe
We
we
are
are
live.
live. Are we live?
Yeah, we're live.
Oh, okay, good, perfect, awesome.
Yeah, we're doing some live stuff right now.
Yeah, we're doing live stuff, man. It didn't show up on my end that we were live, so we're here. Oh, you know what it is? Is that they probably have there's it shows. Oh, there it is, 11. What happens is that when you go live now, is that they give you a commercial now. Isn't that
Oh, is that what it
ridiculous?
is? Hey,
Yeah.
check out this. Do you remember this?
What's that?
I don't know if it's working. Let me see here.
Well, while you're doing that, um, we've got some questions today that we're going to be doing tonight at 8 o'clock. Hardcore Tech. We're going to be doing talks about converters and basically, it's going to be kind of like a satellite view of converters and how they work, and so that way we can kind of get out of the Stone Age
Oh,
on some
dude.
things. So
Okay, that's where maybe it's because I'm not running this thing. Is it won't play?
oh
I think that's what it is.
it's right there. It says add to stage. I got to add it. It's here.
Oh.
It just popped up.
Can you add it?
Yeah.
Man, does he look like somebody?
Awesome.
Man,
That is awesome.
that's how it looked at the beginning of the year, right?
Yeah, that's good, man. That's good.
One of them guys looks very familiar as one of those hack mechanics in there.
That's great, man. What do you guys think of that? That's pretty awesome. I dig that. Yeah, you put that up there. I can put that back out there. We'll play it again and see what people think, and we get more people in here. All right, so we're gonna go on through. We got Tall Garage. We got Wendy English. We got Dan Wantanaza to be. Slant Daily Garage, Twisted Mopar Garage. We got Colleen. We got John. Turbo Tom 416. We got Colleen, and Tall Garage Caesar, and John Wilburn, Buff Del Campo, Clint, Mopar Man 1978, Tall Garage, Indirect Connection, Two Hacks Garage. Boom. What's up, guys? Mike, Colleen, and Kevin, and we're caught up.
Well, dude, there's a lot of comments saying, John Wilburn's laughing times 11, right? And
Yeah,
then
oh, yeah.
Tall Garage is saying, this intro is great. Caesar's
awesome.
saying, really nice touch. Sounds like the drive-in movie, says Buff Del Campo.
Yeah.
And then Tall Garage says, that was pretty dope.
Yeah, I like it. That's awesome. We're going to have that one on there. That's a good one. I like
Kevin's saying, hello, guys. That was snazzy.
that. Yeah.
That was our intro literally for like maybe one show.
One show.
When it was over on AHRA channel.
Yeah.
Well, hey, you know what? I have the actual intro. Remember the one we used to play?
Yeah. Well, Clint says that he missed it. So
Oh, he missed it? Oh,
he missed
you
it. You're going to have to rewind it because that's a good one.
All right. Well, we'll throw it up there again just because you missed it.
Yeah.
Oh, dang it. All
And
let's
also,
open that
too,
up.
I got permission, and this is big. For the people who are in here early, this is big news. This time next week, I will be able to talk about everything that I haven't been able to talk about. So everything that's going to PRI, everything that's going to SEMA will be press released on Tuesday, and the viewers on this channel that talk with me in Dallas every Wednesday night will get an inside look on one of the engineers who designed it, but you will get an inside look on everything that Edelbrock is releasing for SEMA and PRI. So you'll see it right here. No one else will have that. Promise you that.
That'd be some interesting stuff.
It's going to be very
Do you guys have Canuter valves for a slant six?
muffler bearings, man.
Muffler bearings.
Want to do it again?
Sure. Throw it up there.
All right, Clint, this one is just for you. awesome, man. That's amazing. I love
That was literally one episode, and then everything went to crap. But I'm feeling like my old self again. I am
You know,
feeling
it's
more
funny,
like
me
my old
too.
self.
Me
I think-
too today.
Are you? You know what I'm going to do? I came to the conclusion today.
Mm-hmm.
I'm no longer going to just meander around. I'm going to start doing YouTube as a full-time job, right? Like full-time job.
Really?
I'm going to throw this turd into high gear and just let her eat and see what happens.
That's awesome, man. Well, everyone here is going to help you out, so that's great. That's awesome.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
I do
So,
have-
as we're going through, we already introduced these people. We got a few of them going out here. I actually have one here that is from Mr. He's one of our viewers, and I haven't seen him in the chats yet, but Mr. Bicycle Guy 111. When I see him come in, he's actually threw out a question for me about a cam, and for Mr. John Wilburn and I, he actually did post something else about his 58 VW Baja Bug with a 2332 turbo engine in it. So he threw up some pictures on it, so I'll share those later when he's here. So if he decides to come in, if not, we'll just do it whenever. And then we have another one of our guys that I might actually just kind of do right now. Frank Parks, he threw up something. When you see him out here, let me know and we'll talk about it. He was asking me questions about the intake manifolds. He has a smaller LD 4B intake, and he was noticing that the runners were slightly different. They're in different areas, and so I was going to explain to him what was going on there. So yeah, that's we'll do that, and then like we said, we got hardcore tech. So
yeah,
but
at the top of the hour.
at the top of the hour, did we get any questions through yet? No.
No tech questions at all.
No tech
Well,
questions
hey,
yet.
I'll throw up the other.
Let's throw out the
Let's
other video.
see. Yeah, the one that we used to do for the intro.
Oh yeah, that one always gets my like blood going. You know what I mean? I think it's just because of that engine thing, you know. But
It
that
could
one,
be. I don't know
that
where
one that we
one's
have
at.
up there is good. I like that one.
Oh, you know what? I think that one's in a different folder. Let's see here.
So the people coming in here next week, I
here
was
we go.
mentioning this, that you guys here are going to get a special touch of what's going for Edelbrock, all of Edelbrock, being released for SEMA and PRI. They're doing the official release on Tuesday of next week. So that means on Wednesday I get to talk about it. So come back here. I promise you, it's going to be awesome. It's going to be good stuff. All right, you ready?
Well,
Sunday! Race Lane 72, US 30 Dragster. The Coca-Cola bottles of Chicagoland present the Mr. Chevrolet USA Super 240 Car Showdown. From Pennsylvania, it's three-time national champion Jungle Jim Lieberman. From Dallas, Texas, Martin Martin Drag on Vega. From Alabama, the bold one, Bobby Wood. From New Jersey, Bruce Weston's Fantastic USA 150.
that's so awesome, though.
That is
the
so
flyby
awesome.
is so awesome.
Yeah, that flyby is just awesome because if you've ever been there in your life, you know what's happening in your eyes right when it goes past. It's just amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was the one we used to do at the intro every time. But
Yeah.
apparently everyone likes that corny 60s vibe retro entry
It's
intro.
perfect, man. It's perfect for us. You know, even though I do work at the pinnacle of some stuff, I still am a dinosaur in all respects. You know, I do like. I mean, my
I
daily
like
drive is a
old-
carbureted
yeah.
car.
Well, as Ron Ward said at the No Name Nationals, knuckle dragon stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's the stuff I like too.
Yeah, knuckle dragon.
Yeah.
Yeah, but people always like to say that they've there's been, humans have evolved, from knuckle dragging, but I like being a knuckle dragger sometimes. I'm going to stay back, from evolution back a little bit.
I could totally go back to. Well, I'm going to with that '63 Buick Special. It's going 1967.
Oh.
That's what I'm shooting for. Is that Sega? I'm not. It's not going to be in the gas class. It's going to run super stock. But I'm hoping to. There was a Pontiac in like a '55 Pontiac wagon, safari wagon, down in Gulfport when they ran down there, and I was like, gosh, I got to get that 63 special done. You know, that thing would totally fit in this. But Dust Devil Garage is asking a question. Question, do either of you know the cause of the lifter issues on the early 5?
The early 5?
I don't know what the early 5 is.
No.
Oh, I see. It's right below it. 5.7 Hemis.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
I worked with this extensively. Yeah, it's actually been a problem even up to this day. What it is that the how the oiling system works on that. I went over quite in depth on how the oiling system works, but I'll go over with you. The oil band that goes on the lifter, if this is it only goes in one little section, and because the lifter literally lays flat like this, it's not even like at this angle. It's about like 8-degree angle. The band doesn't go up high enough, and what you're going to get is when it lays down, no oil will pool up on top. And then because the cam is literally in its own cavity with a very small slot at the bottom, it's not getting any splash oiling. So what happens is that the oil that's going around the band, it's not getting to one section of the lifter on the very top. And you can, when you pull out a lifter from engine, you can actually look at it. It looks like a little eyebrow, looks like a little smiley face right there. And that's where it actually starts to grab. It actually, now once again, this is just one of my theories, but I've seen a lot of them because I worked on these things quite a bit. And so it would grab there. And so that lifter, you would be able to barely move it up and down. Now, granted, the cams were soft. They were softer, but then the springs weren't very heavy either. So there's a lot of people say that was the cams, and the cams take the lifter out. I believe, this is my belief, is that it's the lifter, as it gets stuck in there, then it takes the cam out, which then, because you're putting all the extra pressure on the wheel, that's what starts taking out, starts running a groove in it, so on and so forth. So there's design of a lifter where the oil band now has been increased in diameter, size, thickness. So where that eyebrow used to happen, now there's oil there. And also too, instead of oiling up through the shaft, through the rocker, down the push rod to the lifter, now the oil would come through the block, but oil just the band. Comp now has the lifter where it oils the band and then also oils up through the push rod. And what it does is, because that's a much bigger hole there, they also have high pressure oiling that goes down to the lifter wheel, which then adds oil to that part of the cavity inside there. So you're getting oil onto the wheel, onto the camshaft, so on and so forth. Here's the only drawback.
It's a lubrication issue then, right?
It's a lubrication, and it's a lubrication issue that I believe is on top. They've known about this because you can see it on those lifters. If you pull them out, you go to a wrecking yard, you pull the lifters out, you will see it in there. It looks like a little tiny eyebrow right on the top. It's just below the oil band, just above the wheel. You'll see it. It's plain. It's plain right there. You can absolutely see it. So the only problem that with doing all this is that you're going to have a slight windage issue. Now, Hemis have a great oiling system as far as how it brings back the windage. Keeps the oil away from it. It actually goes through the head, and it's got drainback tubes in the block. So it comes through the head, goes through the head, and goes down the block. This is going to create some oil that's going to go on top of it. But for people like us who are not into like the ultimate performance, where you're trying to get the last little, horsepower or whatnot or whatever, creating a little extra windage, this is going to save your engine and make it last incredibly better. So that is the real reason for it. I've worked extensively when I was at the other cam company, and then when I was here too, I did a lot of I was around a lot of the development. So that's the main reason for it, is that right there.
Well, your friend Mr. Frank Parks says, "I'm here, was cruising incognito, you blew my cover."
Oh, okay.
What Zonda 2B says, I found out that the GLH turbo flywheel needs to be ground flat and not turned on a lathe. The taper thing is still a mystery, but all the people I've conferred with say grind it flat. And I agree with that.
100%.
Yeah. Otherwise, I'd be riding in one spot.
Yeah. Tall Garage.
Yeah.
As far as who do I like for custom pistons, I'm going to answer this one because I like CP Carrillo. I don't know who anyone else. I like CP Carrillo. Over the counter ones, I like Molly's, but CP Carrillo is who I deal with, and I've been dealing with them for a very long time. What was the other one? It was something before it was CP Carrillo. What was that before?
I have
Oh,
no idea. I've never dealt
yeah.
with them.
Damn.
I've only had two sets of custom pistons made,
Yep.
and both of them were Wiseco, and I
Oh,
really liked dealing with the folks at Wiseco.
okay.
But I've only had two sets made, right? And this is just for my own private stuff.
Yeah.
And even matter of fact, when I did Jack the Giant Killer 300 Buick, I used an off-the-shelf piston that was for a 305 Chevrolet Sprint car with a 6-inch rod.
Yeah. Thanks, Shane. I need to get a set of those lifters for the Ram. Okay, killing on through. Bryce is saying that's why you see so many high patrol cars with low miles. Yes, absolutely. The biggest problem with those is because they do a lot of idling.
Idle time, yeah.
Yeah,
If they had an hour meter on it, it would be pegged.
it'd be pegged exactly, and that's why they go out on that. Is because Hemis run very low oil pressure when they're at idle. I mean, I think the TSB on that is like 5 to 10 pounds at idle. So that
Sounds like a Buick.
Yeah, that's okay. I don't like that personally, but it says it's okay. See, I'm moving on down. Okay, here we go. Kevin, could you guys talk about some about the pros and cons of large piston domes on small block Chevrolets? Try to get more compression ratio out of cheap $300 pistons versus $1,500 plus heads.
Ooh.
Yeah, here's the thing. Okay, pros, you're going to make more power, and that's really the only pro on them. Flame, everything else is a con. You're going to have a problem with flame kernel. You're going to have a problem with flame front. You're going to have a problem with detonation. You're going to have to run. You have to worry about squinch, and then weight. You're going to have to account for that because whenever you have a dome, you're going to have extra weight inside there. What do you run into normally with that, Dallas?
Okay, so pros and cons of large piston domes on small block Chevrolets. Trying to get more compression ratio on the cheap $300 pistons versus $1,500 plus heads, and that's because you're gonna have to decrease the chamber on what you have, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, dome pistons, in my opinion, this is just my opinion, and there is a little bit of fact to it, but when you dome the piston, the flame front does not travel evenly across the face of that piston because it's the way of the irregular shape in the face of the piston. Now, the most ideal situation is a dished piston that unshrouds the valve from the third, essentially your X, Y, and Z axis, so your third dimension, right? That's where if you could get a dome piston or a dish piston and achieve the compression ratio that you want, that's going to work the best, okay? And that's because it unshrouds the valve and it allows air to travel around the valve in the third dimension. Okay. Mm-hmm. Now, when you do dome pistons, it does the opposite of that. All right. And it shrouds the valve in the third dimension, minimizing how much air and fuel will come down around that valve and mix in the chamber. Also, when the explosion occurs, you got to remember it's got to go up and around that irregular shape in the third dimension. Mm-hmm. Now, the dome piston might give you the compression ratio that you want, but it's probably not going to give you the power that you want. And also, it makes it very finicky for detonation because you have an irregular shape on the top of the piston. If it was me and I was trying, let's say small block Chevrolet, the ticket used to be 64cc chamber heads, but I'm assuming you probably already have 64cc and you want something smaller, right?
Yeah.
So, and you're limited on what you're going to be able to get, okay? Now, a lot of people would say, yeah, 305 small chamber head with the small valves. Well, that'll work. They make a 305 HO head that actually flows pretty decent, about like a, what is it, the turbo fire head. I think that's what they were called.
Fast burn or whatever it is.
No, not the fast burns, but remember the ones from like the early to mid 80s, the turbo fires. That's what everybody used for the small cubic inch modified production motors, right? Mm-hmm. And they will handle a large valve. But the 305 HO head, it's not going to give you the horsepower that you want. It's going to take horsepower away. It'll give you some good torque because the velocity through there is pretty dang high with that small valve. But there is other options. There was smaller chambered heads that were like available for 283, 307 that don't have that super small valve like a 305 Chevrolet does, because it's not limited by bore. Remember, the 307 has the same bore as a 283 Chevrolet, right? So it's a 3.875 inch bore. So you could get ahead with a decent valve combination in that, and it'd be this smaller chamber. It won't be 58cc like the 305 Chevy head, but you might come up with, say, a 60cc chamber head, and that might be a lot cheaper option than buying pistons even at that point, because most of the time what you find is, if you find a decent head that's a cast piece, factory piece, people will dang near give them to you these days anymore.
Yeah, yeah. Now, I remember one time that I try not to mention anyone who that I worked with in the past, but Mr. Sherman, he was angle milling his heads, and he was getting almost 58 cc's out of them.
That's an option too.
Yeah.
When you angle mill a Chevrolet head, see, a Chevrolet's at 23 degree valve angle, right?
Yeah, you get it
When
to
you
like
angle
18.
it, yeah, you can angle it down to like an 18 degree.
Yeah, that's what he was doing. That's what he was doing back in the day. That's why he had some of the fastest cars around. So he was angle milling them to 18 degrees. He was getting 58 degrees out of them, and he was getting almost half a point or
58
almost,
cc.
yeah, and he was almost getting a half a point more compression or a full point. I don't remember the exact math he was telling me, but there was a point there where you could only get so much compression out of a stock stroke. He was doing this, and he was getting a whole nother point out of it, and that's why he was making all these class records.
There is a caveat to that, okay? So if you angle mill the head, you have to angle mill the intake manifold for it to seal properly. Because what you're doing is changing the face of the angle on the head. So if there's two ways to do it. You could either angle mill the head and then take the reciprocal angle and mill it on the face of the head, or you can mill the intake manifold. Me personally, I'd like to leave it all with the head, so that way if you take the head off, you put another set of heads on, your intake manifold will still work just fine.
Yep.
So I would look at that as an option, because if you got a decent set of heads but you just need some more compression, just like Shane was saying, angle mill them suckers. $300 for a set of pistons would go a long way on angle milling a head, because when you mill a head, it generally costs like $100,
Yeah.
and it don't matter if you take off 25 thousandths or 2. It's the same price. Right?
Yeah.
That's the same way with boring them. You know, I always looked at them as boring them, like, wow, dang, if it's 10 over, it's still going to cost the same amount as if you went 60 over, right?
Yeah. Now there is one other thing I forgot to. When you do angle mill the head, you do have to re-drill the holes for the bolts, because they're going to be at a slightly different angle.
You actually just have them re-drilled at the machine shop.
Yep, exactly. That's them. So just have them done all at the same time. And I believe I had this done once for someone, and I think it was like $200 or $250 to do the head, the corresponding angle on the intake, and then a slate on the intake side of the head, and then the bolts. So it wasn't much at all.
But that is a good option. I wasn't even thinking of that. Angle milling is a good option though too, especially a small block Chevrolet. Even if you can get the head down to, let's say, 20 degrees, you're going to notice it is going to have a noticeable improvement on flow.
Yes, massive. Just that 3 degrees is massive, because you unshroud that valve. Okay. Did I miss anything here going through?
No, I was scrolling down. I said Bryce Kaufman's asking.
Pros and cons. Oh, here we go. Yep. Pros and cons of cutting a big block Mopar crank bearings to RB size. The only problem that you have with that is the oil journal. When you drill the hole for the oiling on those, they go at a certain angle, and from the main over. When you cut them down, the only problem is that now it's going to be at a slightly different angle. It's going to be out.
It's the same angle.
Groove.
It's just moved over.
Yeah, it's just moved over, so it's going to be slightly. It's going to look like a different spot. So if you just have to chamfer that on that one side. Now, any shop is good at this. Now, the only con on those is that it's got to be a good crank. Usually, the Mopar cranks were good enough to do that, but if it's like an aftermarket crank, like a Scat or we've done this, and we've gone through some of the hardness on them, and you got to have them, rehardened and then renitrited, and it's more expensive than just buying a new crank. So Look at
So get a steel
Ohio,
crank and do it with a steel crank.
yeah, Ohio Crankshaft. I believe call
But we
them
were
up
just
and
we were just talking about this. They offer all the services you would ever want to make a
yeah,
crankshaft pretty bitchin'.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And in fact, when I was at Crower, they used to do a lot of our work for us because we were overloaded sometimes. So and they get a lot of my business still even to this day. So
So Bryce Kaufman's asking a question here.
sure.
Where do I go to get a shirt from Dallas? I already have the pinup girl from the professor. Are you talking about Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood?
Yeah,
I
I
don't have
did
a
see
Mr.
that one.
Rogers' Neighborhood shirt. I
What?
didn't have any made. I never had any made. I had decals made, and that was it. And then everything kind of went to crap, so I never really made any shirts.
I
I
think
got,
it's time for you
but
to get
Clint's
one.
telling you can go get an AHRA shirt on eBay, and that's where I put all the AHRA shirts.
Yeah. And then just sign it. You know what I mean? Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. How about that?
Well, I think I'm probably going to have to end up just making some Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood shirts.
Okay, so Caesar's asking one here. Greetings from Peru, guys. Would you let me know on any ideas proper final ratio for strong takeoff of a 70 Skylark 350 barrel? Compression ratio is 9 to 5 to 1, M20 4 speed, 265 60 15 in a GM with an 8.5 rear end. I know mine. Let's see what you get. For me, it's going to be a 355 or a 372 or 370.
Okay, let me know any idea for proper final ratio for strong takeoff in a 70 Skylark. Okay. The more gear you give it, the more takeoff
Yeah.
it's gonna
But then
have,
you,
right?
yeah.
But you're gonna have a trade-off to where that's an M20. It has no overdrive. It has 1-to-1 ratio as fourth, right?
Mhm.
373 with a 265/60 R15 is probably the max you could get away with and still be able to drive it at some kind of road speed. If your road speeds are all limited to like say 55 miles an hour, which was probably what 70 something kilometers an hour. I don't know what they have in Peru, but that I would probably do a 373 or a 355 gear. Buick's the factory gear 342 used to be the most desirable because it was the best for the big blocks. The small block likes a little bit more RPM. A 373 would probably be ideal, but like Shane was saying, a 355 would be a good trade-off because you could actually run it down the highway no problem at 70 miles an hour or probably 90 kilometers an hour, and then it would have the giddy up. I don't know what gear you have in it now, but if it's any of the 70 Skylarks I've had before, it's probably like 256. So you put this 355 in there, it'll be a whole new world.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
that's why I was saying that's why 355 to 373. That's the way to go.
yeah.
And Mr. Wilburn, you are absolutely correct. This is exactly what I thought he meant. Also, is because you can't cut it from one size and make it larger. This is what I figured he meant. So yes, that's why I said it like that. Let's see here, Big Block 402. He's saying my old 327s with domes, 64cc worked great in the 90s. Yes, mine did too, but that was 30 years ago. 30 years ago. Think about that. 30 years ago, man. Okay, Dallas looks like George Ray's drag ship has a new owner come January 1st, still being run by George grandson Tyler. Ooh,
Huh.
I got to get out there and check that place out one time. Would you
Well,
go down the track there?
no, I've always wanted to go to George Ray's, and now that I don't have maybe the chains of the AHRA hold me back, I might go there and run.
Can
I
you
don't
go
know.
there? I'll go there with you. How about
Yeah,
that? I'll
yeah,
go there. Why not? Because I've always wanted to go there. And it's what, a 2.5 hour drive from my house.
yeah. It's not far at all.
Yeah, that would be yeah. I'll say with first responder, increase in flow, but a bench flow will tell you straight hole and no seat if best. If you don't have swirl or tumble, flow don't matter. Thoughts?
Okay, increase in flow,
Flow.
but a flow bench will tell you a straight hole and no valve is best. Of course it will. Yeah, there's nothing restricting the valve.
Mhm.
If you don't have the swirl and tumble flow, don't matter. Thoughts. Increase in flow. Okay, there's a couple ways to do this that's actually pretty cheap that a lot of people don't do anymore, right? Like most people just go out and buy aftermarket heads and just throw a bunch of money at crap anymore and just bolt stuff on. It saves me so much time, and then you're paying for it for the next 9 months.
Yep.
The things I like to do are old school kind of stuff. And if you noticed, a Chevrolet has 11/32 valve already. Okay. Generally, if you take a decent Chevrolet head, and I don't know if you're running a Chevrolet or what, but I'm just using a Chevrolet as an example. Generally, if you take a used Chevrolet head in there, it's going to need guides. It's going to need valves probably. They wear really bad on those 11/32 stems. But if you're going to install some guides and maybe some new valves, an aftermarket valve is a significant improvement on a cylinder head. Okay, over a factory valve. That is generally a significant improvement. I'm not going to say numbers like 50% or whatever, but I'm talking a significant flow increase just because of the shape of the valve. The factory valve is not shaped for performance at all. It's shaped for efficiency and economy to make the thing work, right? The cheapest valve they could make to get you going down the road.
Yep.
And when you look at an aftermarket valve, like say if you go to PRI and you walk into the Manley booth, right? Manley used to make a ton of valves. And you'll find that the taper on the back of the valve is not so much a tulip at all. It's actually very much more
Flat.
what's that?
Like almost flat on some areas.
Right, but it is so much more tapered.
Yeah,
I guess.
tapered at the valve, yeah, and then
Right.
flat where it is, yeah.
And it'll be sometimes it's undercut at the stem, right? Because that's a cheap trick too, is undercut at the stem. Now, if you really wanted to get serious and you're going to put guides in it anyway, go find a set of LS valves, right? That are aftermarket LS valves where they have a 8 or even 7 millimeter stem, and then they'll be undercut under that. So if you remove, let's say, a quarter of the stem, you're increasing flow right there just because the stem is so much smaller. But then with the taper and the tulip shape of the valve, the air flows around them so much better. So money is really good money is spent on a good set of valves, and you can put them in almost in any head, and it's going to make a drastic improvement. As long
good
as it's a
valve
factory
job.
stuff, yeah, and a good valve job. That
Good
always
valve
helps out
job.
too.
You know what I've noticed on my Slant 6 stuff is that just taking the factory valve and just back cutting the valve and doing a cleanup in the bowl was almost better pound for pound. I can gain 20 CFM doing that. If I did all the other stuff, they can get like 180. Some people can get 200 out of them. But for the average guy, you can get 180 CFM out of one. But then you're doing exactly that. You're doing all the valve changes with the stock valve. Just back cut it, clean up, get a good valve job on it, and you're in the 160s. You're good to go. So yeah. Bryce is asking, performance-wise, is there a benefit to changing the size of crank bearings to RB? I guess in my question.
Oh, he
yes.
just had them backwards. That's all.
Oh
And
yeah,
I think
yeah,
we kind of picked up on that when we were talking about it. Like,
yeah, yeah.
okay,
We picked up on that.
yeah. Let's see. Colleen's asking, doing research on spring pressure for my stock 318. I want to run a bigger cam with the stock springs. Everyone talks TC ratings.
I don't know what TC is. I was actually going to Google that real quick. TC.
I'll be running a manual. How does that figure into the equation?
She must be saying torque converter ratings. Must mean what she's talking about.
I don't know.
I don't know. Colleen, I really don't know on this one. You're going to have to...
Well, if you want to run a bigger cam with stock springs, okay, one, you're going to run into a couple of problems, especially when it's in relation to lift and coil bind.
Oh,
that's gonna be
maybe
a
it's
big
coil bind issue. No, that's talking about. Colleen, try that question again. Try it again. We'll come back. We'll circle back to that one. He's answering the question is basically is that the smaller the bearing, and it's less surface speed given RPM, also to the friction and theoretical more power. Actually, it is more power, and you'll have less oil, you'll have less speed as far as on the bearing. There's a lot of things that go along with that. So yes, the smaller you can make that bearing. That's why I prefer the 400 big block Mopar over all of them. Big piston, smaller bearings, high RPM. And it's a
Right. Well,
smaller
and
deck.
Sheen and I talk about this probably once a week. Okay. So when you're talking the tall deck big block Mopar compared to the short deck big block Mopar, the short deck one has the smaller main journal, right? The reason for that being is those were shorter stroke engines, right? And when you have shorter stroke, you can afford to have a smaller main bearing because the stroke is shorter, meaning that the rod throw has more overlap with that smaller main journal. Okay, when you start adding stroke, the rod journal gets further and further away from the center, giving you less overlap, right? So it takes strength out of the crankshaft. So that's why you see one of the bigger motors, they went to a bigger main bearing so that they could have more overlap with more stroke to make the crank strong. When you turn them down like that, okay, there's a lot of benefits to it, but there's also some side effects, okay? When you have a smaller main journal, if you could get it down to 0, there would be no bearing speed because it wouldn't even really rotate if you could get it down to true 0, right? But the reality of it is, the bigger you make that, the higher the bearing speed, the more oil you need to feed that main because it has more surface area, right? And it also has more area to bleed out. That's why I think when you start looking at engines, their very first configuration that they were designed for is generally the best. And that's because all the math was done for the oil usage. What did it need for an oil pump? Well, they built an oil pump for that. And then if you look at some of the later engines, they went to bigger and bigger mains. And all of a sudden, like a Buick 350, they have all kinds of oiling issues. And that's because it's got a 3-inch main now, and it was originally designed for a 2.3-inch main, right? So you now have 3/4 of an inch more bearing surface on that bigger motor, requiring more oil there, and you got 5 mains, right?
Yeah.
And so nobody's ever taken that stuff into consideration. I like stuff with small main journals. I like stuff small main journal. The problem with the small main journal is you'll never ever have a big stroke small main journal motor. You cannot. There's not enough overlap to keep strength within the crank.
Yep.
And if you do that, let's say you do take a big Buick 350 crank and turn it down and drop it at a 215 block. Okay, you wanted that big 385 stroke and that real dinky 3.5-inch bore. That thing would probably, to be honest with you, would probably break the crank just because it's so weak at that point. And if you did ever RPM it, it's sure as crap it's going to be laying on your garage floor in a couple pieces.
Oh, she's saying, she did say torque converter. She's saying yes. Okay, so let's go back to our question then. Doing research on spring pressures for my stock 318, I want to run a bigger cam with the stock springs. Everyone talks torque converter ratings. I'll be running a manual. How does that figure into the equation? Okay, so basically it doesn't. Don't even worry about it then, because you are now the torque converter. So basically just get whatever cam that you can run under the stock springs, and then just know that with the torque converter rating, that's where it's going to make the power. So let's just say that the power is like, for what you're going to be doing with the stock 318, it's going to make power probably about 1500. So that's going to let you know that when you're letting out the clutch at, like, say 1000 RPM, it's going to want it. It's not going to want to hesitate on you, but it's not really going to be in its power band until 1500. So when you let out the clutch, just be easy on it. And then when you let out the clutch and you get going, then you can roll into it and you'll be fine. That's the only thing you got to think about, is that you are now the torque converter, and your foot and your left and your right foot now are basically torque converter. So that's all it's got to play into it.
The stock spring thing, me and Shane have played with this a couple of times. When I did the super stock Buick 350 head, there was something I came up to that I had not really thought about before. If you're using a stock spring, and remember, your ratio on your rock arm might be like 1.5, right? So it makes it easy if you use 1.5. Okay, so if it's got 60 pounds on the seat, and then, like, say 95 open, all right, that's 95 times 1.5 on the other end of that rocker.
Yep.
Okay, now it also has to move that rocker, the push rod, the lifter, plus the retainer. if you remove some of the weight on the retainer, and just say you buy a decent set of aftermarket retainers that are half the weight, like a chromoly retainer,
You just raised that RPM.
you just raise the RPM capability of that spring, right? So I would, if you're looking at using stock springs, there's nothing wrong with using stock springs. Put a good retainer on it and take some of that weight out. The other thing is, make sure your camshaft isn't so large that you run into coil bind, with running those stock springs. Because what you'll find is the stock springs are generally pretty flimsy, but they do have a lot of coils on them, and that's for longevity, right? I mean, that's really what it's
Cycling,
for.
yeah, that's what it's for. Oh, Caesar's back here. Just install Lunati 207 213 with 1,000 to 5,000 RPM. Operating range, good idle, 800 CFM quadrijet. And I was wondering if the combination with the wide ratio M20 would affect the takeoff with a 355 set with a posi. I think that would be just perfect.
It would be a pretty good street combo right there. It
Yes.
might actually scare you.
Yes, that would be awesome because all that torque that thing's going to make, especially with that camshaft, is
Yeah.
going to be
And
brutal.
that wide ratio M20 is going to be perfect for it. It'll eat it up. And what you'll find is that with the RPM band that small, if you can keep the RPM above, like, say, 2,500, if it drops down each individual gear change, to above 2,500, you're probably pulling like a freight train the whole time.
Yeah. Bryce says, so in a stroker scenario, the RB is a better option? No, I don't believe so. I personally believe that the B engine, the 400, is the better one. It's already got a bigger bore, and you don't have a tremendous deck height. It's like 3/8 of an inch, I believe, shorter. I'm just trying to go through. This is a live show. I don't have my notes here in front of me, but and it just fits better in most cars, anyways. Most engine base. I prefer the B engine, and you can get 500 cubes out of those. Plus, you're not going crazy on the stroke. If you say you get one that's got, like, say, a 3.75 stroke, and then you can bore it out, you're just under, I think is what makes it like a 450 something. If you do that, and then that way you can rev that thing to the moon, because now you have a huge piston. You don't have that crazy of a stroke. You have basically a stock style stroke of a 440. And then you have a little bit, you can get rid of some of that rod length on there. You can raise the pin height in that, you can get your compression height down, lower your bob weight, and that thing will rev just incredibly fast. And that's why I liked them.
Short deck engines actually are the more ideal in a motorsport situation. And I'll give you an example that is undeniable. NASCAR started doing short deck Windsor stuff probably 30 years ago. Right, we went from a Windsor at 9.5 to 9.2, which was the Cleveland, but they're still running a Windsor block with a 9.2, to even shorter, to a 9-inch. Then they went to 8.7. The closer that you can get the reciprocating mass to the bottom of the engine, the more stable the car is going to be. And that's in NASCAR. Now, in drag racing situation, I don't really know if it plays any factor in there whatsoever. The things I have noticed about drag racing is that the bigger the cubic inch it is, the less effect the weather has on it. If you're bracket racing, right? That's why you see top dragsters, none of them have less than 496 cubes. None of them. And that's because the weather,
632 is a common now.
right. And that's because the weather doesn't affect them all that much. It might drop a little bit, and you fall off a couple hundredths, okay? And in bracket racing, a couple hundredths is a big deal. Now when you have the smaller cubic inch engines, 350 cubic inch, it might fall off a tenth and a half with a weather change. So it's a big factor when you're drag racing for big cubic inch. But I believe that tall deck and short deck really doesn't have much of a play on drag racing, but it does change the rod to stroke ratios. It puts a lot of benefit towards high revving big cubic inch stuff.
Yeah. Bryce is asking, so a 505 stroker 400 low deck is no bueno? No, that is the bueno. That's good. Yeah, that is muy bueno. That is the ticket. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's the way I would go personally. I built a lot of those 400s strokers for people, getting the 440 crank and putting them in the 400s. That was like the big mainstay back in the day, and that thing was just, they worked great. In fact, they worked incredibly well. And then that was during a time where it was hard to get reliable parts and make engines that were reliable that would make 750 horse, and that was a very common deal. 400 and I can't remember the number. I think it was like 450 something cubic inches, and then you had some really good heads. The Mopar had the Stage 5 head, I believe is what it was, which was it was a wedge head, and that was a good combination for 650 to 700 horse all day long, and that was a killer combination. Even back in the 90s, that was a killer combination.
Oh, I see a thing from Tall Garage saying, so I see we're also talking about YouTube videos suck. Are mine okay? I don't know if anybody is talking about YouTube videos that suck, but from what I watch, Ken, your stuff is pretty good.
No, what I have is in our description is that we talk. When John was on here subbing in for a little while, what we did is we threw it out there for if someone found a video, we could critique it. I was playing off of what you were talking about,
Right.
and I was like, "Hey, send us a video, and we'll tell you if the video sucks or not." So I just been throwing it out there just for fun. But yes,
Cool. Yeah.
if you guys find a video, I mean, me and Dallas have no problem putting it up on the screen, and we'll be like little silhouettes in front of it, just watching it live and just talking shit about it. If it's crap.
If you want us to pick and prod your YouTube videos, we can do that.
Yeah, we can do that. But we won't be mean, man. We'll just tell you, hey, try this, try that, whatever.
Big Block 402 has a question right below that.
Yeah, but what was the name of that show? You always tell me.
Mystery Science Theater 3000.
Mystery Science Theater 3000. I used to love that show, man.
Yeah,
That was awesome.
I always like my favorite shows from like the 90s was that one, or early 2000s, I guess. And then do you remember the one when Spike TV first came out? They had the MXC.
Yes.
Dude,
Yeah.
I loved the MXC show, man.
Dude, that was great. Like, it was brutal.
I
Like,
know, and there was all these sexual innuendos that you didn't get. Like, you'd have to go back and watch it all. Like, oh my
Yeah.
God, this person's name is Muff Diver, right? Like, because
crazy.
it was an old Japanese show called Takashi's Castle that used to be all the rage when it was stationed in Japan. People would watch it, right? But what's funny is when they brought it to the U.S., they didn't know what they're saying, so they just freaking dubbed all this stupid, nonsensical like stuff in there.
Obnoxious. It was great.
It was so much fun.
Yeah, I love that. If you don't know what we're talking about, go back and watch it.
Yeah, watch some MXC. Get your eye holes filled with some MXC. You're gonna love it. It's
that
great.
was when life was still great in the U.S. So,
Yeah, oh yeah.
Big Block 42 is asking, Professor, can I have a TCI Saturday Night Special that is probably 20 years old? Can I get it refurbished, loosened up if I send it in? Absolutely. Send it into the TCI. You can put a tension chain. They're the one in Ashland. Now I go to Ashland one time, sometimes 2 days a week, but mostly it's just been one day a week, and we'll take care of it for you.
Yeah, well, the cool thing is you can probably say, hey, since I have a little bit of extra cash now, open this sucker up, put some rollarized bearings in it. I want some furnace brazed fins, because that Saturday Night Special probably doesn't have that, especially if it's 20 years old.
Yeah, well, like I said, I know someone.
Yeah, well, the reason why I say that, the Saturday Night Special was a fairly tight converter. It used to be like say like 1,500 or 2,000 stall. It might be 2,500. I don't remember. But if you get rollarized bearings in there, the Torrington bearings, and then have them furnace braze the fins on it, dude, you could hammer that sucker with some nitrous.
Yeah. And that's exactly what I used to. It's funny you say that because I would always get the lower stall converters.
That's what I always did.
And I would hit it with nitrous, and it would bring it up 1,000.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mostly all parts and rust. Patrick's saying short deck engines have much stiffer cylinders. Absolutely, 100%.
There's
correct.
no downside to a short deck motor.
Yeah.
There's not really at all.
Here he's saying that the only time I picked a big block over an RB over a B would be the heavier truck with a manual trans. Everything else, I'd build a B. Personal opinion. Yes, I mean that's one way to do it, because that way with the RB you get the extra stroke out of it. I believe it's a. God, I'm gonna sound so stupid here because I'm a Mopar guy, but I think it's 331 is the stroke. 3-inch 31, I think is what the stroke is on a 383 400. So it's a very short stroke. So Oh yeah, Tony's Garage is saying right here 451. Yes, it is 451. Thank you, Tony. I knew it was like 450
Oh,
something.
you're right. That was the big stroker combo in the 90s. That's what
I
everybody
built so many
ran,
of
and then
those.
they figured out you could do a 512.
Yeah, right. But that was the ticket because you could get those 400s out. Everybody was after the 440s. They were the hot engines, but you could get the 400s out of like the Cordobas or
Magnums and
the
Cordovas.
Magnums, all
Yeah.
the late 70s crap that was just laying around. You can get those things for cheap, $79, man. I can get one of those engines.
Well, that's what the engine takeout used to be down in San Diego, was $79.
It
Yeah,
didn't matter what it
those were
was.
the days, dude. The $2 burrito and the $79 takeout motor. Oh, geez. Bryce
You know how many
Kaufman
times-
says that is the bueno needs to be on a shirt.
Yeah, no, yeah, that's actually a reference to the wifey. The wifey is a bueno no bueno person. So yeah, that is the bueno. That is 100% wifey. I cannot take.
Well, that's
credit
what we
for
should
that.
probably do, is put that on the shirt. You know,
That is bueno.
Slant Daily Garage with her on the front. That is the bueno on the back.
It's the bueno. Oh, totally SoCal right there. That's funny. I like that. Oh, you know what's funny about that? You were talking about the $79 engines and the $2 burritos. There was also one more thing in there. If you didn't bring your tools, it was $50 for them to pull that engine out too. And there's some times where I just didn't feel like
Oh,
doing
dude.
it. You know,
You know how many times I've done that here in Tennessee? Is like, okay, I don't want to sound racist or nothing, and it's not going to, but like, all right, I go to the junkyard. I'm not expecting to find what I find, right? That's the biggest problem. Oh, crap. Buick 455 in the junkyard. Like, how would this happen? How did this even get here, right? How is this not sitting in Grandpa's garage somewhere?
Yeah.
All right, well, we got to do something about this. I can't have a 455 go to the scrapper. So I walk up to the front. There's generally like a couple of meandering, non-English speaking people waiting there by the front door. You drop them both $40 a piece, and they'll go pull that motor for you.
Yep.
Right? And that's how you do it.
yeah. I would always, there was always a few Spanish speakers, you know, in San Diego. They were
Yeah.
always out front, and they would always have the tools, and they would know. I'd walk in, and they go, "Hey, man, if you need something, come in the back." So I'm like, "Hey, man, how much? Pull it out. It's $50. All right." I'd give them $25, and then I would give them another $25, and I would feed them. Oh, Tony's telling me it's 338, so I was close. I was pretty close. So that's the stroke on them. So imagine that 400 has got that big bore with that stroke. That's why I loved them.
Well, and Patrick does bring up the obvious here, right below that. The only downside to a low deck engine is you cannot make a 520 out of it.
He's correct,
Yeah,
but
you can't.
I'm all about the super RPM. Oh God, yes, man. 331 is the 318, 340. See, I knew, and 338 is the big block. Okay, like I said, it's a live show, man. You know, we're trying to do this on the fly, but yes, but
Well, if you put an 871 blower on it, you can make it 520 cubes.
yeah, right. He's correct, but I like to RPM my stuff, so that's why I've never really been, you know, the super big stroke guy. You know what I mean? John Wilburn is saying they make good 512s.
Yeah. No one looks at 8 cubic inches as a problem.
Ooh, this one's right up your eye. This is right up your alley right here. Tall Garage. You go ahead. It's all you.
I now have the build a GM 60 degree V6 engine, probably a 2.8 liter base. Now, because on JB's little shop, I'm still waiting on if there will be guidelines. He said I couldn't put 30 psi into one and it live. Now I got it. All right, so let me tell you 2.8. All right, you're going to need to find an S10, right, and put this thing in, I'm sure. But 2.8 isn't the end all be all. You know, they made a 3.1 and they also made a 3.4. And did you also know that they made a dual overhead cam variable valve timing 3.4 liter? That's something that I want to see somebody do. That's the 60 degree V6 I would do. If I was going to go to the junkyard and just pick one, that's the one I would do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And real quick, while we got another question coming in here. just a heads up to everyone that this is a huge announcement that next week we're going to be talking about the PRI stuff. You guys are going to get it here first before anyone else. The press release is on Tuesday night. Wednesday night, I'm going to be live on the air here talking all about it, and I'll give Dallas a heads up on it before we go live, so that way he'll know exactly what's going on and whatnot. But it's good. We got some good stuff. So this is everything that Edelbrock is releasing for SEMA and PRI, and we're going to talk about everything about it. So you guys are going to love it. It's going to be good stuff.
Huh. Ron Ward is in here, the voice of the No Name Nationals. Mostly old parts, says a 400 Mopar has a shorter stroke than a 305 Chevy. Oh. Man, big bore, big old bore on that side.
Yeah, it is.
What is it? 3.5 or 4.35 inch? Is it somewhere around there?
It's massive. Yeah, it's a big bore, and it's just an incredible, awesome engine. And once I started looking at, that kind of stuff, that's the 400 was just the way to go. So Bryce Kaufman saying, "What's the end all be end all low deck stroker setup for me?" The end all be all is the 451, and the reason being is because you don't have a crazy ton of stroke. You can RPM the crap out of, which I know exactly that's what you want to do, Bryce, is RPM it.
Isn't it the 451 isn't using a 383 crank?
He's using a 3.75 stroke crank.
Oh, that's bigger than a 383 crank?
Yeah.
Okay.
3.38 is a 383 and 400.
Oh, that's right. Somebody just said that.
Yeah. So for me, this is what I would do, Bryce. If I was in your shoes, and I know exactly what we've been friends for a long time here now, talking about engines and so on and so forth. I know you've never been happy with any of your setups. I would do a 400 block. I would do a good steel crank 440, so a 3.75 stroke. I would raise the pin height on the piston. I would get that compression height as low as possible.
You make the longest rod possible, huh?
I would make the longest rod possible I would fit in there, and I would get it as light as possible. I would buy the absolute best head that I could, and I would run that thing to the moon. 7,500, 8,000 RPM all day long, and you could easily get 700 to 800 horsepower. I was making 700 horsepower, 650 to 700 horse with that in the 90s, with this, I think they were called Stage 5 heads, but they were Mopar Performance 5 heads or something. They were a wedge head, and I was doing that back then. So I'm very sure that with solid rollers and the type of heads they have now and the head flows that they have now, you could easily do that and not have to go crazy. So here it is. Clint's telling me it is a 4.342. That's the bore size on that thing. I'm sorry, 4.3.
Dude, that's literally a 30 over Buick 455.
It's a good sized. It's a good size.
That's actually the Buick 455 had a massive bore, I always thought, but that's even bigger. That's a standard bore. It's 30 over 455 Buick.
Yeah, and so 800 horsepower comes down to what head flow and how much RPM you want to spin it. If you can get 400 CFM of air out of the head, which I know they make that.
Yeah,
you make 800 horse at 7,500 RPM easily. That's an easy combination, but you're going to have to RPM it a little bit.
How big's the main bearing on that B block?
It's small. I don't know.
Somebody was saying earlier, it's John. I think John Wilburn put it up. It's 375 for a.
It's three. I think it's
for
no, it's
440?
2.6. I think it's 2.6 something. 2.6. I don't know. Top of my head. John, Mr. Wilburn, save us here.
What is the main bearing size on that B motor? Because if it's less than 3 inch, oh god, that sucker's gonna sing.
Here it is, right here.
2.625. Man, that's small for a big block.
Now you understand why I love the 400.
Yeah, no, that's awesome.
Yeah.
I was looking at Buick stuff, and I was happy when the 300 had a 2.5 inch main bearing. I was like ecstatic. 2.5 inch main, gosh.
And the big block will live. Yes, it is. Now, here's the thing, though, is that you got to get a good 400. Remember, it's a shorter deck. Don't put any concrete in it because it's a shorter deck. It's a lot more stable. Now there are some blocks out there. If you go to Hughes engines, they do show you what you're looking for. Back in the day, they were plentiful, but they're hard to find now. But in 76 and 77 and 78, or vice versa, right around there was a few winterized blocks. And now I've seen them, and I've seen some that have a slight variation on that. They have a thicker webbing. They were like they were made for like cold weather or heavy duty type of deals. So they were really thick. There was no undercut on the mains.
Probably a cop motor.
And they were awesome, and they were 800 horsepower, 900 horsepower back then. So it's here it is. It's the 230. You're absolutely correct. That's the thick webbing. That's what it says on the side of the block. It's 230.
So the other thing it would be on that is be conservative on boring it over, right?
Yeah, I wouldn't. You don't need to. There's
Just
no
do a
point.
stock bore if you can get away with it. If you can straighten it up and take the taper out with a stock bore.
Yeah, on some of those, I would try to even go with just 20 over if I could at that time. I would go very little on that.
Well, with that bore being that big, that's the downfall of the big block Buick is it's got such a big bore, it makes the block flimsy and flexible, right? And so when you bore them, the rule of thumb when they were running super stock way back when used to be not to take them any more than 20 over.
Yeah.
Right. Well, now guys are doing 60 over, and oh man, I don't know why it overheats or eats number 5 main bearing or number 7 rod bearing every time. Oh, I'll tell you why. Because it's made out of rubber bands, and you just cut half of it out.
Dust Devil Garage is saying the downside to a low deck for me is tunnel rams are hard to find and more expensive.
What?
Go with the Max Wedge then. Some of those Mopar ones you had to run spacers on them. So if you run a low deck, it actually will bolt up because it moves the ports into a different position, and then you can run a standard
But
thing.
there's
So,
tunnel
yes.
rams available for 383s.
Yes. Oh yeah, but they're harder to find. He is right. A lot of people put them on the 383s because they like the RPM. It was harder RPM 440, but you could have 383 or 400. So they're really kind of used up a lot. And Ron is 100% right. 400s are prone to bore taper.
It's
Yes,
that big
because they
bore,
were,
short stroke.
yes, exactly. It does happen. So that's why he's saying the exact thing. Just clean it up just enough. Don't just
Yeah,
arbitrarily
square
go
it
30 over. Do 20 if you
Yeah.
can.
If you can do it at home, do it. Don't take
Right.
anything out. The machine shop's always going to be like, oh man, that surface is terrible. We got to bore it. I try to never bore anything if I don't have to.
Yeah, I forgot to turn my phone off. I'm going to turn it off right now. I just got.
I was getting blown up a few minutes ago.
Yeah, I
Let's
normally
see
really.
here.
I left my notifications on because farts and poo are funny. So here it is, farting, on there. So we're at 8:00, and
We got some hardcore tech coming up.
yeah, we're going to do some hardcore tech. Now today, hardcore tech is going to be kind of like soft porn. It's going to be a really, really easy one. But we're going to be talking about
Clothes on, rubbing each other kind of stuff.
no. We're going to be talking about torque converters here and about how torque converters work, because I've been working with someone, and I'm not, please, no names, no nothing, but I've been working with someone on a torque converter, and they just don't understand. And maybe it's torque converters must be magic or something, but they're very simple to understand, and we're going to kind of go over the pros and cons on how you size them and whatnot and what affects things. So let's just say arbitrarily you have a 3,000 horsepower, 3,000 pound car, and in it now torque converters work on torque, but everyone always wants to say that they have 400 horsepower. Okay, if it's a street car and you have 400 horsepower, that means it's somewhere in there, because you're not going to be spinning this thing to the moon. Somewhere in there, it's going to make at least 400 foot-pounds of torque because of the crossover and how the math works. So let's just arbitrarily say that the thing makes about 4,000. Let's call it 4,000 RPM. It's making 400 foot-pounds of torque. So with that setup, let's say 3,000 pound car, 400 foot-pounds of torque. Something's got like say a 391 gear in that range. And it, it's just standard gear ratios, nothing crazy. So like say a 245, 145 seconds, and a 1-to-1. So nothing low ratio. Gear is you're going to be like say a 28 tire, like everyone's running nowadays. So if you have that set up, and you'd want something that's right around 3,500 RPM for that, okay? Because if it's making peak torque at 4,000, and you're at 3,500, you will flash it in there. Now, what stall means, it doesn't mean that the car is going to essentially just freewheel. The engine's not going to freewheel. It's going to put a little load on it. The only way to get the true RPM out of that thing would be a trans brake. But what you're going to do is when you hit that number, that's when it's going to put down the torque through the converter to the engine, from the engine to the rear end. Sorry. And so what's going to happen is that it's going to start to load the thing at about 3,000, and then it's going to come up to about 3,500 and sit there, and that's where the magic's going to happen. So here's what's going to affect things. Let's say everything's fine, and then you do some upgrades to the engine. If you make more power, your stall is going to go up. If you add weight to the vehicle, your stall is going to go up. If you change the gear ratio, so to like say from 391s, you go to 355s, your stall is going to go up. Here's where your stall goes the other direction, where it goes down. And this is a clear thing. If your engine makes less power than what you said, it's going to go down. If you have a problem with your car and it's going to continuously get worse and worse and worse and worse, like this car was, the stall is going to go down to the point where the engine's going to be making almost significantly 100 foot-pounds of torque less. It's going to be acting just like a stock stall converter. So there is nothing you can do for it at that point, because it's going to be making so little power. The way the thing's set up, a torque converter is a dumb animal. It's a fluid coupler that takes fluid. It's a pump.
I thought we were going to talk about how it actually functions here, man. I've got this awesome layman's idea of, okay, have you ever heard of, a torque converter works like a fan.
It does.
Okay.
Yeah, two fans in front of each
other. And have you ever taken a box fan and face another box fan, and you turn one fan on and the other one starts to turn? That's exactly how your torque converter is working. Okay, so what happens is your stator is stationary. That's the one that's being pushed by the fluid, right? That's the one that's actually coupled to the input shaft of the transmission.
Yep.
All right. Your rotor is the one that spins on the outside shell of the torque converter. Okay. And as it's turning, fluid's being pumped in, and fluid is non-compressible. And what it does is it's spinning, and it's forcing the stator to move on your input shaft. Okay. Now you change the variation of those fins to where it gets less bite. It's going to spin faster before it starts affecting the stator.
Right? Or distance too.
Or the distance.
Yep.
Yeah.
The distance.
Or size, like diameter.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
That's the big thing. That becomes efficiency. That's what I was going to get to.
That's surface area. That's all you're looking at is surface area is the big difference. But it's essentially just two box fans facing each other. One of them turned on.
Yep.
Right. That's the one that's running on the engine. That's the one where your rotor is actually coupled to the back of the engine, and your stator is coupled to the input shaft of the transmission. And as that engine's turning, that's what's causing the stator to turn on the input shaft.
Yeah, and here's where the magic comes in. So you have a pump side, which is considered what is the side that bolts to your, let's call it to your crankshaft, flex plate. Then you have the turbine, which is inside. You can't see it. And then you're going to have the stator. Now, inside the stator, there's going to be a sprag. And this is where the magic happens, is that when you pump in that fluid across through the back, through the turbine, and it comes and it hits that stator. Where the magic happens is when that stator can sit frozen, you're going to get what's called a K value. This is where it's going to create more torque because you're shooting fluid at it, and then it's making a 90-degree turn. And because of that, it's going to create more torque than is actually put in there for only a few seconds, or sometimes even less. But when that stator is not moving and the sprag is moving, because all these have inside the stator, there's a sprag. When that stator is not moving and it's frozen and it's not spinning at all, that's where you get, like, say, a 1.2 or 1.3 value on it. So you're actually going to put more torque than that engine produces until that thing starts to spin through that converter. Once that thing starts to speed up and start moving, you're actually going to go below the 1-to-1 ratio. Usually they're about 7% loss through a converter once things start getting up. That's why they go to a lockup converter. So What I'm getting at is that if you have a car that's set up and you have all these parameters, and then your engine starts to make less power, like say it's having carburetor issues or timing problems or whatnot, what was up here before now is going to be way down
Well,
here.
and it's even more worse when you have a custom converter, to be honest with you, because
Yep.
what happens is your
Designed
custom
just
converter is designed for peak torque of that engine when it's making peak power,
right
right?
there.
Peak torque.
Yep.
And that's where it's getting that K value of 1.2 or 1.3, and they're capitalizing on that value. That's why the cars leave tires up, right?
That's right.
Now, when you start losing horsepower, your K value starts going the opposite direction.
Yes, and it's below one on sometimes because you can't even freeze the stator because there's a distance between. You have a distance, like let's just call it arbitrarily 100,000s between the turbine and the stator, and then between the pump and then the stator on the backside. Let's say you have 100,000s. If you increase that distance, you're going to create more stall. It becomes inefficient, but yet you're going to create more stall. But if you don't have enough RPM to turn that, remember it's a big pump, to shoot it across and hit that stator, because of that distance, now it's going to go even lower. So what I'm getting at is when the custom converter is made for you, make sure that you do all the specifics. And if it starts going away, don't just blame it on the converter. Look at the outside
Well,
influences that are
and
happening, because usually it will tell you, hey, I have a problem with my engine. I'm not making the same amount of power that I normally was.
here's the other thing too. If you're about ready to plop down the serious money to have a custom made converter, because they're about $1,000 to $1,200,
Or
okay?
$2,000 in some
Or
ways.
it depends what. Yeah, you can get up to them Pro Mod ones. It's like the ones you can disassemble in the pits and change stuff.
Yep.
You're talking, $2-3 grand for one. But if you're going to plop down the money for that torque converter, before you do that, take that money, go to the dyno with your engine, and get a freaking number, a serious number.
Exactly.
Okay, because then it's going to really work with your torque converter. Because what you're really doing is, like, if you don't know the real power band and the numbers it makes,
Nope.
you're guessing, you're shooting in the dark, and that torque converter might absolutely be a turd. Okay, so because your combo is way off of what you're thinking it is, right?
Yeah.
How many times have you seen that where, okay, in the 90s, the ticket used to be like this. You go get a 350 Chevy, you put a set of double humper heads on it, right? You throw in your whatever camshaft, I don't know, just some, back then the cheap grinds was like a Comp 268H, okay? That's what everybody would cram in every 305 or 350 Chevy there was.
Right.
And then they'd have a set of double hump heads, right? And virtually like a performer intake manifold and a set of headers. Oh, well, the cam is 25 horse. The heads are worth another 25 horse. I'm looking at 400 horsepower 350 Chevy. And here's the sad part. If you were to take one of those 90s motors and put it on a dyno, it probably was around 300 horse.
That's right.
Right?
I agree with that.
And guys used to buy converters, like off-the-shelf converters for those things all the time. And it's like, look, an off-the-shelf converter is for something that you're willing to street drive every day and you just want a little bit of snap, right? That's all it's for. Do
Yeah.
not buy an off-the-shelf converter like, like say Big Block 402 was saying earlier. He had a Saturday night special. It's 20 years old. Okay, he wants to loosen it up some and this and that. Those are the converters that everybody used to get. Was those things, and they didn't. Yeah, Ron's saying right. The Crane Fireball. When you put all that combo together, generally the car was slower than it was in stock form. That's what you'd find out because you mix-match the combo so wrong with the horsepower guesstimate, and then you threw a converter at it, and it just made it an abysmal pig. That's where
Yes.
that term came from, was a pig.
Yeah, pig. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, exactly. So that's hardcore tech. If you got any other questions, SlantDailyGarage@yahoo.com. I'll do my best for it. But there was a reason I talked about this today. There's a big reason for that. But that's about all we're going to say on that. But it's imperative to get it right. But I agree with Dallas 100% on this. Is that dyno your engine? You got to know what it's doing. I have enough dyno sheets out there that I've dynoed engines. I know within about 10%, let's say, plus or minus, of what an engine's going to make right off the bat in my head from all the stuff out there. I can get within 5%. I'm usually pretty close as far as where the peak torque's going to be.
Well, Shane and I used to run around at Match Race Madness, and you could look at the cylinder heads on the car,
Yeah.
and you could actually almost determine what the car was going to run based on the cylinder head that was on it. Because you'd look at it and say, "Oh man, that sucker flows 290 CFM on the intake, right?" So you're looking at roughly about 600 horse this thing should make.
Yeah. And didn't you know the weight of the vehicle?
If somebody built the bottom end that was worth a crap, it was going to make 600 horse, and then a decent cam in there, you knew what it was going to run.
Yeah.
But it's almost down to like it's not a science. It's just a ballpark guesstimate, but it's a very educated guess, right? Because the cylinder head is this capable, the rest of the car should be that capable too. And normally, what you find is you go look at the cylinder head and you say, "Man, it should make 500 horse," and you go watch it run, and it's nowhere near what it should be.
Ron's asking about this. On the subject of fluid couplers, what is the best way to flush a converter without disassembling it? Believe it or not, ATF is a very high detergent type of fluid. I would go that route. I would use ATF and clean it out. And I'm just going to say, I'm not telling you to do this, but I've heard of people using diesel fuel to do it because it is kind of an oil-based type of, and it's also cleans really well. I've never personally used it. I use ATF to clean all my lifters, my rockers, because it won't strip it, and then it doesn't cool it down and introduce fluid like water, moisture is what I'm trying to say. Because when you get something really cold, it'll absorb the water and start to rust. ATF will just protect it also too. So that's how I would do it. See, we're going through. Okay. I'm going to see if I could do a share screen on here, and I'm going to talk a little bit about.
I like this question down here from Schweers and Gears. He says, "Hey guys, just got done cutting a big chunk of floor out of my 58 Baja Bug. Any advice for making custom patch panels? I've got a bead roller pneumatic flanging tool. I did this before. I replaced floor pans in San Diego matter of fact, when my last tour in the Navy, the last 6 months, I stayed with a buddy while my family moved here to Tennessee, and I was probably going over to Shane's house picking his brain on stuff. But I was making floor pans for a 73 El Camino. They don't make them. You can't buy replacement ones, and especially the ones that go in the Smuggler's Cove that rust out like mad. So me and my buddy that I worked with cut it all out, and we're like, man, how are we going to make floor pans for this thing? And I had this freaking ingenious idea, okay? And I took a big piece of poster board, and then I shaped it in there the way I wanted it, and then taped it all together and held it in place. And then I went and bought a cheapy boat repair kit at Walmart, and I took the epoxy that you use for fiberglass, and I just brushed it on, just a thin coat to hold its shape, right? And then when it was all done, I had a full template floor pan. But what I could do is cut it up into pieces, right, to get it flat, and then you trace it all out, and then as soon as you let it go, it boings right back into shape.
Yeah.
So that's how I did it. It turned out okay.
I did the same way. I just made it with cardboard, and I made each one a piece, and then I laid it down on a piece of aluminum, because it was like wherever there was a change, I just made an angle there, and then laid it flat, put it out, and then cut it out, and then was able to fold it in those areas.
Well, so, we ended up making it the floor pan. We just got it. It was like, I want to say 22 gauge. I think that's what it was, 22 or 24 maybe, but it was pretty thin. But all we ended up doing was buying the, like, you ever seen a old school body hammer? It's shaped like a teardrop. It's plastic. Yep. Went to Lowe's, bought a sandbag, right? Instead of buying that pad that you use to beat the body panels, you're only doing it one time, right? So we bought a sandbag and one of those teardrop body panels and just hammered it in shape.
Yeah.
And it came out great.
Yeah. So, Tall Garage is asking, Shane, tell me why aluminum slant six suck or not. Here's the problem with them is that they have an open deck. That is the main issue with them. If you don't know what an open deck is, there's nothing holding the cylinder bore stable at the top. A lot of Hondas were like this in the 90s, a lot of the B series. And so what we would do is we would mill them out, and then they have a bore stabilizer. You would press them there, and then you would have to rehone them and do all that stuff because it would, kind of distort the bores. On the aluminum Slant 6, it has an open deck, so what it will happen is at higher RPMs, the bore will shift. It's going to blow head gasket. It just is. There's people who can make them survive. You never know what you're going to
technology just wasn't there when those things came out. Was what? It was 1960, 61?
Yeah, 60s. Yep.
And so it's the same as like the 215 Buick. The 215s, the sleeves fall out of them.
Yeah,
right?
I wouldn't make it. If I were to do an aluminum Slant 6, it would be something that I got this. It's intake from Clint. It's got two. I can put two Hollywood 1920s on it. So I would put an aluminum Slant 6. I would put a very tiny cam in it. I would put that on it with the two. I'd put and then put it like in an early version Dart, and then just make it like a cruiser. I wouldn't try to race one at all for that reason, unless I could put a bore support in there that would be pressed in there and support the bore on top. You'd have to deck it.
I've got it figured out. If you really want to do one, I think I have an idea on this. Okay. Old school Buick hot rodders used to the cylinder heads from 67 to 1970 on the 455 used to have two little exhaust crossover passages that would heat the carburetor and run the choke. Okay. And when you went to an aftermarket intake manifold, you could plug those off. But when they went to the later emission stuff, that two little crossover tubes became like a big square. Right?
Oh, okay.
And you couldn't seal like a performance intake manifold on like an Edelbrock Performer or a B4B. You couldn't seal them on there. You had to do something about those big square crossover passages.
Mm-hmm.
And what guys would do is take a freeze plug, tap it down in the hole, and then you would melt aluminum, get like 20 cans, and heat them up in a ceramic, like a dish, right? And you'd pour that molten aluminum in there. I don't see why this wouldn't work if you took it to the machine shop and you got the bores where they bored it or they honed it to where it was perfect, like using a good Sonnen machine.
Yeah.
And you knew the bores were straight at that point. Take that block, put it on, don't put it on a stand, put it on a table, heat it up really good with a torch. Just get like a MAP gas torch. Don't melt it. Just get it warm, nice and hot, right? Melt a whole bunch of aluminum and just pour it in that open deck. And fill in those cavities. Now, I don't think it has any water jackets after that, right?
No, it's just one big water jacket that goes all the way to the bottom.
That's what I thought. Okay, so you could definitely run it that way, but you're going to have a problem with keeping it cool. Now, if you wanted to go all out and you're making a race Slant 6 and you're aluminum blocking it, that's how I would do it. I'd fill that block in, and then I would take it to the machine shop, and I'd make sure everything's still straight after it cooled off, right?
Yeah.
But and then I'd run alcohol injection on it, or so like E85 or something.
Yeah. I've always wanted one. Yeah, like I said, I would just make it a driver. It's something I'd probably build and have the wifey drive. Like her cruiser car. So that way, pop the hood, it'd be two carbureted, aluminum, Slant 6. It'd be just cool. That's an aluminum Slant 6. Ooh, you know what I mean?
Yeah, you definitely wouldn't want to use a 170 aluminum block or make one. Because golly, would that thing be? Because the 170 you got to wind up, right? And it's got a comparable bore and stroke to wind up. They're not out for all the torque. They're out for like making good power for 170 cubic inch. And I'm sure them bores would shift all over the damn place.
Yeah. See if move on. You're talking about JB Weld. Oh, sure. Here we go. I know guys mentioned these briefly once, but what's your opinion on Rhodes variable displacement lifters? Consider going these route, flat taster versus hydraulic roller, or for my 377 small block. Thanks. I wouldn't do that. I would, if you're going to run a hydraulic, I've said this 100 times, just put it 20 thousandths from the bottom. So bring it all the way down to the bottom and then bring it 20 thousandths up. That would be your best, and that way you could really RPM that flat tap it. That's a very common thing that a lot of people do, and the reason why it's so hard to RPM hydraulic, is because as you get higher in the RPM, even on a mechanical, your camshaft is going to get smaller. You're going to have a smaller camshaft. So let's just say you have 250 duration at 50. And even on a solid flat tappet, let's just say at 7,500, you're going to lose 3 degrees before and 3 degrees after. Plus, you're going to have a bounce just because of deflection that you're going to have. In a hydraulic, it gets even worse because if you're just putting 20 thousandths of preload in it and it gets going really fast and it can't fill that oil chamber underneath there to keep that lock, you're going to have 100 thousandths there plus whatever the deflection is. I wouldn't do it. I would just run, if you can, I would just run a hydraulic roller. They're so inexpensive nowadays, especially for a GM. I would go that route. I'd get a short travel lifter or just put it 20 thousandths from the bottom and let her eat. That's what I would do. Here we go.
Let's see.
Hey,
Well, I wanted to take a crack at that one real quick.
Sure, go for it. What do you got?
Well, that's a 377, right? So
Yeah,
that's a
RPM.
400 block with a 350 Chevy crank in it.
That's RPM.
That is an RPM motor, right? Rhodes lifters, okay. I've used Rhodes lifters a couple of times, and I have never had a problem with them whatsoever. But what I used them for was you'd take a camshaft that was a little bit too radical
Yes.
for the street, and it would allow it to create enough vacuum to run vacuum brakes.
Yeah, what it does is it bleeds it down. It has the check balls taken out of it, so it makes the cam physically smaller until you get the oil chamber full again. So
Right, and that's the way it worked was you would have good torque off of line because it makes the camshaft smaller. It makes it like variable duration camshaft. Well, actually, variable lift, I think is the one.
Well, it's
Because
also
the duration's
variable
still the same, right?
Yeah. Duration gets smaller because it's going to
Compress.
and then lift too. It's going to makes everything smaller because
Okay.
it just
Well,
makes
it would increase torque off the line, and then it's supposed to bring it on at the top end when the oil pressure's super high, when the engine's wound up, right?
Yes.
It would be like the same kind of concept as variable valve timing. 377, that motor's meant for screaming, man.
Exactly.
And I think a Rhodes lifter is the wrong thing for that 377. I think a hydraulic roller is the wrong thing for that 377. I think that thing needs a solid roller camshaft, and that's
And
what
let
it
her go.
needs. Yeah.
Yeah. And here's the thing too, is that I've played around with Rhodes lifters a lot, and I didn't want to go into this a lot, but you have to have a dyno to make a Rhodes lifter correct
Work.
because you have to know where to be because they are so finicky on. Now you'll never know it unless you play with it, but you can lose torque and horsepower by 10 thousandths, like a quarter of a turn or whatever preload.
We were
You
talking
can
about this
really-
today. Yeah, we were talking about this today about solid flat tappets cams.
Yeah, exactly. So you can lose that
Lash.
much because just how much it loses above and beyond. Unless you have access to a dyno, I wouldn't. And now there's people who swear, I threw them in there and it was perfect. Yeah, you may have hit the combination and you got lucky. 2 thumbs up to you. 99% of us are not that lucky. I am not. I have to physically beat it and do brute force to get something to work. And that's the reason why I learned so much is because I had to beat on everything to make it work. So
Knuckle dragger.
yeah. Okay, so we got a little behind here. He's saying that perfect. One-eyed cat. Dude, I would love to buy that from you. How about that? Actually, Tall Garage is saying it first, so I'm not going to steal it from you. You can have it. Brief Rock, how do you both get started with vintage car stuff? He wants to know.
Man.
For me, I wanted to race. I had no money. At the time, vintage cars were very inexpensive. To me, they weren't very vintage at that time. They were just cars that were being thrown away. In my area, darts were just plentiful. And I went from Volkswagen Bugs were my very first one because they were actually inexpensive. When they got the same price as a V8, I went to V8s. And then I just wanted to race. That's all it is for me. And I had to learn, if I wanted to go fast, I had to learn how to use junkyard parts to go fast. And at that time, it was all just happened to be Mopar stuff. And at that time, there was not a lot of stuff. So I just had to figure it out.
I got roped into it when I was a kid because my dad was way into it. And it wasn't vintage at the time. They were only a couple years old, right? So we were going to the drags, and then my dad decided he wanted to run an HRA stock eliminator. And back then, stock eliminator was pretty much stock eliminator. There was primarily stock stuff on Now they're out of control. But back then, we would try to think our way around the problem. Instead of spin your way around the problem, we would think our way around the problem, right? And it was like, you go to the stock eliminator races and they'd say, there's no teardown. There's no teardown? Well, dang. Then we're going to throw the kitchen sink at it, you know? Who's saying a Thermoquad that's 1,000 CFM didn't come on a Buick 455, right?
Yeah.
So nobody cared. There was no teardown. So, and we were always junkyard and finding parts and doing stuff. And then when I got to be, I guess 13, 14 years old, I got interested in cars. And my old man bought me a subscription to Hot Rod Magazine for my birthday and Cartoons Magazine, right? If you remember Cartoons. I was more into cartoons at the time, but I liked reading Hot Rod. And see, I realized from a pretty young age, Hot Rod was not really my bag. Because back then, see, this was late 80s, early 90s. The big thing was the Boyd Coddington kind of stuff, right?
Yeah.
The Price Unlimited.
Yeah.
And I was like very limited on price. You know, I had a job working at a grocery store. I was making like $4 an hour. And so my price was like seriously limited. And just like Shane, I ended up gravitating toward the junkyard to find my parts. And then I stumbled upon Carcraft Magazine.
Yep.
And Carcraft Magazine was like the poor man's hot rod magazine, right?
Mecca for us.
Yeah. And then what happened that was actually even better, to tell you the truth, was, I don't know, somewhere around 1991 maybe? Freiberger came in there at the helm of. He wasn't running Hot Rod Magazine. He was at the time was just a writer.
Editor. He was an editor, wasn't he?
Well, no, he was before. He was just some.
Just a writer.
Yeah, he was just a nub writer, you know, like a new guy, and he had these magazine articles that would wreck Hot Rod, in my opinion, because Hot Rod was all Boyd Coddington era. It was Price Unlimited, and then he had this Dart that they hacked up and dropped a 440 in it with a transmission that was not even the correct length for the cross member, and he chained it into place, and it was like all the stuff that was sacrilegious to be in Hot Rod Magazine is what he was doing. And it was, I don't know, a breath of fresh air for a guy like myself who was working on a big time budget. And then they moved Freiberger over to Carcraft, and then there used to be 3 guys working at Carcraft that were pivotal in my young infancy. You know, Freiberger was one of them. There was a guy named John Kiewitz. I think that's how you say his name. And he ended up going over to, I don't remember, what was it, Road and Track or Motor Trend or something. And I think he died a couple years later. He wrote some really good stuff. And then Steve Maggs was a guy that, you know, Steve Magnati, that you've seen him on here. Like, when we used to do the lives with Steve Maggs, I was gaga, like, and starstruck, you know, and oh man, Steve Maggs, this guy wrote about, you know, everybody remembers like him for the 502 much gasser that he did. But I'll tell you, there was some really cool stuff he did before that. There was one, if you go look on eBay, you can probably find the magazine, one called The Bad Seed, right? Mm-hmm. It was a Chevette that they dropped a 500 cubic inch caddy in.
I remember that.
Took a street racing in at the Terminal Island in outside Long Beach, right? And that was the ticket for a guy like me. Mags also did How Much Will It Take? And that was an article where he did a 318 in a Duster and sprayed it till the crank fell out, right? And I mean, it took a whole article for him to just spray it up to above like 250 shot. Yeah. And the ignition started failing. So then they put an electronic ignition in it and sprayed it with like 350 shot. And the crank fell out. But he always did really interesting, different stuff. It had like a junkyard flair and flavor that was my generation, right? We had no cash. So,
yeah. And someone asked me while you were talking there, how did I get to Mopars? They actually sent a text over. Now, me having an engineering mind, this is actually something. Everybody that I was around was into Chevrolets. And I knew a lot of the problems with Chevrolets. I knew that they always complained about 23 heads. They always complained about the ball and stud. They had to put screw-in studs in them. About the rods, 5.7 rods. I mean, there was just a lot of things that they. So what I did is I started researching about engines and whatnot. Now, remember, I had no money, so I had to figure out how could I go fast, reliably longer than they could, because they would blow them up every 2 or 3 months. I couldn't do that at that time. I started looking at the design of them. A Mopar head, 18 degrees right out of the bat, perfect. Shaft mount rockers right out of the bag, perfect. Plugs, it's a semi-hemispherical like style of head, because the plug comes in from the top, perfect. 6-inch rod, 125-inch rod right off the bat. Tall deck heights. They did have some issues, small blocks. They had oiling, so I went to the big blocks, but then the big blocks had their own issues. But as far as for what they were, I could put more power to a stock Mopar in stock form, remember that, than I could to a Chevrolet at that time, and it survived. The Mopars just seemed to take a lot more of a beating.
I never did the Chevrolet stuff just because it was so cliche. Everybody and their brother had one.
Well, that was it too. As I wanted to look around, because I knew all the problems with it. I mean, if I was a Chevrolet guy, I could have been probably way faster.
Even back then, though, Chevrolet is like, if you got a nice Chevrolet, it was expensive, right? Like a Monte Carlo SS, that sucker was expensive. But I could go get a 4-year-old Oldsmobile 442 Cutlass, and it was virtually the same car. Actually, it was better because it came out of the 8.5-inch rear end. But it.
So that's why I got into Mopars, was that. And also too, here was one more thing, and I'm just going to just throw it out there. In my VWs, I used to run Chevrolet rods and Chevrolet rocker arms on my Volkswagens, and at that point I had blown up so many Volkswagens and just melted them, like literally on fire, to where you couldn't put them out because they're magnesium blocks. I said, I'm just done with this shit. And so I just was like, I don't want to put together a V8 that I'm putting those parts into my Volkswagen. So I'm going to try something different. And that's not a crack on anyone. It just, at the time, that was my take on it, because at one time it was Ford versus Chevy versus, Mopar versus Pontiac. Now, then it became like domestic versus import. Now it's all of us engine burners
versus the electric.
And then it said, well, we've evolved as human beings because we're EVs. I'm like, no, you're just the end user of the EV. How about all the pollution it took to get to that point? I don't even want to open that pocketbook. So
I just did Buicks, and I couldn't figure out why my junk wouldn't run as good as everybody else's. And it was because everything was against me, right? Like 350 Buick, 3.8-inch bore. It's virtually the same bore and stroke as a slant 6 and a V8 form. And I'm trying to run with a 350 Chevy. How come, this guy could buy a set of heads and just clean my clock, put a cam in a stock motor, and kick my ass? And I just couldn't figure it out. Yeah. And I kept trying, and so I kept tearing stuff up. The reason why I like the bad seeds so much is I had a Chevette. I had an 87 Chevette. I think it was probably the last year they made them. I put a turbo V6 Buick in it. And I put that Isuzu 4-speed behind the damn thing. And it lasted. The training, I went through 2 trainings, but the motor, God, I blew it up every 4 months. Blew it up. So they just, boost is a fickle thing, especially with a carburetor.
Right. Yeah, I tried that too. On my Volkswagen, I tried to do a turbo blow through with my IDF Webers. It didn't work. Then I tried to do a suck through. So I had a 2-barrel carburetor. I had a Holley 350 carb, and it was basically before the turbo. And just getting that pig started was just incredible. Like, it was like literally 5 pumps.
That's how the turbo V6 Buick I had was. It was a 79 model. So it was a carburetor suck through, just like the turbo Trans Am at the time.
Yeah. And it was crazy. It was like there's this one point when it was really ultra cold, impossible to start. And there was like this really good medium where it was awesome. And then when it was ultra hot, you just not start. You just let it sit. Just it's gonna vaporize and just go and have lunch and come back.
Well,
and
that's
it's
what I
just
always
not
thought
gonna
was
work.
super dumb was that those the draw through ones with the carburetor on them. They're
Yeah.
they're bolted to the turbo, right? You're on the on the intake side, but what happens is when you shut that car off,
Heat
that
soak.
exhaust side heat sinks the intake side, and your freaking carburetor's on there attached to it, so it's just vaporizing and boiling the fuel right out of the carburetor as it's just sitting there cooling off.
Yeah, and then if you look at where the carburetor's at in relationship to where the ports are, and it's got to go through a turbo. When it's hot, it just vaporizes. Like literally, it just vacuum locks the whole damn thing. It just
Yeah.
vapor locks it essentially. And then when it's cold, you can't get enough raw fuel down there to get the thing started. So it's just There was a few nights when I was in Escondido where I was trying to get that thing started, and it was probably 40 degrees out when we were getting ready to leave, and everybody's taking off, and they're all cops are on their way, and I'm on the side of the road, just wouldn't start, and it's like, okay, well this place has got a little bit of a hill, so I can kind of go down the hill, and I can put it in second gear, and you get halfway down the hill before the thing even starts to light off. It's just it's terrible.
Dude, that's when you should just like forget about it. I'm in a bug. They'll never believe that I'm driving fast, right? So I'm just gonna get a skateboard out here and start skating, and then when they pull up here, you're like, oh, they just went that way.
Yeah, but I was in Southern California, and a lot of the cops knew that some of the bugs were the fastest cars.
Oh, dude, I remember the first time I saw one was I was at Carlsbad, right?
Uh-huh.
Carlsbad was like the ticket in the '90s. It was the last of what they used to call Drag City, right, in Southern California. And there was a track in Southern California you could run top fuel any night of the week, right? And there was literally 7 tracks, and all those 7 tracks combined were called Drag City. So you had like Lions, OCIR, Irwindale, Carlsbad. You had San Diego, which was up in the mountains near Ramona.
It was actually Ramona Airport. You could still Google
really?
Earth it and see the track. Yeah.
Yeah, but all those together were Drag City, right? And Carlsbad was one of the last remaining SoCal tracks, and it had remained there over the years, still open because they were smart. In the '70s, they built a huge, like a motocross track right behind.
Yeah. A GP track, actually.
It was freaking huge, and I mean, there was always dudes riding on that thing, so that's what kept that drag strip open. But I saw a bug there the first time, like it had, I don't even know what wheels, Impy wheels maybe, I don't know.
The
Had
5-spoke piece. Yeah.
Yeah, and it had little pizza cuttery Volkswagen tires on it, right? And it had a roof rack, and it had all the bug stuff that you see in Southern California.
Sounds
and
like
it
my
had a
car.
it had a little stinger on it. No, well, not even a stinger. The stinger is the one that sticks up like a Baja bug. So it had the little downturned fart pipe thing.
Yeah, no, that's just on a on a street bug. It actually comes out from the bottom, and they're about 12 inches long, and it's literally looks like a stinger for a bug, not the ones that stick up.
This one had like bumpers on the rear, so it had to have like something that was under the bumper, right?
Oh, so they were quiet packs then. Yeah.
That sucker, I kind of laughed like, a bug. Oh my God, man, I'm gonna have to watch this thing run. They had like 40 horsepower. That sucker left tires up, and what was so cool about it is the little hood, like in the back, was flinging way out, and every time you bang a gear, like blam, slam, slam, and I'm like, holy crap! And then it ran like a 1240,
Yeah.
and I'm like, that was just a bug. This was in the '90s, right? So
Was it black and almond?
no, it was blue, and it
Oh, okay.
had like a blue with a white push open
Yeah,
mid roof.
Oh, okay. So it was a rag top. Yeah.
That sucker was so fast, and I mean 12s in the '90s in a bug. Okay, I'll give you a perfect example. A Mustang 5-liter, a brand new one off the lot, ran 1460s, right? 12s was like stupid fast for a street car. Now you throw a freaking Volkswagen Bug at it, like it broke my brain. Like I couldn't process all that, right? I mean, it just didn't make any sense. How the hell is a Bug that fast? And we went to look at this Bug, and it was like, this looks like a basic Bug motor with a dual port motor. I mean, how the hell is this thing so fast? And it, of course, what it is that fogger system, spraying it from the Okay, so where the intake came up, that's what I liked about street racing stuff. Okay, you didn't really expect to see any of this stuff, and you didn't know where to look to begin with.
Mhm.
On the bugs, as the intake manifolds come up, it's got the dual port set up, so it's got an individual port for each individual cylinder, right? But when they come up and they're in that curve, that tight radius, right inside there, you put a fogger nozzle where nobody can see it, right?
Mhm.
And you spray the piss out of that thing because it can't hurt it. It's literally like a steel crank in a magnesium case with aluminum jugs, and you can't hurt it. I mean, that was the place for bug racing, was SoCal.
Yeah. It's a magnesium case, cast iron bores,
Oh,
aluminum head, held together by studs.
Yeah, studs.
10 millimeter studs.
it's like a World War II aircraft engine, only 4
Yeah.
cylinders.
Yeah, yeah. Yep. I had one of those. I had one of those bugs that ran low 13s, high 12s when I had the 2275. This is this is NA, just high RPMs, and then when I went to the turbo, I really couldn't get it out of the 11s. I couldn't pull fourth gear without a wing on the back to keep the downforce. When I went to fourth gear, it made so much more torque because it was under load, and the bug is shaped like a wing. So and mine was a swing axle 67, so it would literally lose weight on the rear tires, and you could feel the car literally trying to pass you, the back end trying to pass, and it would get light, and there was definitely a pucker moment. You know how short wheelbase a bug is, so a little bit is a lot, so
I was just impressed. I had never seen a bug run like that in my life. But then I realized what they were doing is putting the bus bug motors in them, or the bus motors. I guess they're like 1835 is the number,
well that's
right?
yeah well
And then
that's
you run a Porsche 914 transaxle, and it all bolt up.
well yeah there was a, if you had like say an IRS, you could get a bus case, right? They were a little stronger, a little bigger, but I had a swing axle, so because I was 67. So at that time, there was a company called Transform, and they're out of LA. And it was one of those things you could drive up, and it was like you could just pick up a transmission, and they were ready to go. And I remember I had like a welded first and second, and then I think it was a 377 gear in it, and then I think instead of an overdrive fourth, I think I had a 1-to-1 fourth in it, and that was just badass. It was good stuff, man. That was good times. I had so much fun with that. Oh, and then he said, rollerized. Dumul used to make cranks. And, I think it was CP also. They used to make roller bearing cranks, like needle bearing.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And you could just, because, the case is split, right?
Right.
And so you could just RPM those things to the moon, like literally to the moon. And during that time, that's when I started learning about wrecking yards. I remember this, AZ, AE, and AH, and those you look for those numbers on the case. Those were the dual port, dual relief type of blocks, cases, let's call it, for Volkswagen. They were 1600s, and there was a few of them that were made in Brazil, which were brand new cases, so you weren't getting leftover crap. So you could take one of those, you change the crank out, 69 millimeter stroke, and then if you ran the 92 pistons, that made it an 1835, and that was like the most common thing. And then I found a block at Johnson's Bug and Machine that was 94. Now 94 pistons are huge, and usually when you go to 94, it goes into what's called the shuffle pins, the pins that actually hold the studs in. So they either relocate them or they run different diameter studs. So this one had been like shuffle pin. This thing had been, it had all the trick stuff on it. It had a full flow. Now full flow on these, they didn't have any. The oil pump was on the back of the case. So you're actually looking at it right there. And this one it would actually come out, go through a line, go through a filter, and then go back in. And then I had, some of them will have step offs in the back, and like I said, dual reliefs in them, and the reliefs are in the front and the back, so that way it doesn't overpressurize the block. So, I can get into Volkswagen.
There was a guy that it was at the Auto Hobby Shop at the MCR, the Marine Corps Recruit Depot base. That his name was Pat, and he lived in Tijuana. He retired from the Navy and moved down to Tijuana. Lived in Tijuana. Was married to a Mexican girl, right? And he would bring, every time he came up to San Diego to work on his car at the auto hobby shop, he would bring a bug motor because they made that same bug motor all the way up
Yeah.
to like 2004 in Mexico, right? So
exactly.
you could pick up one of those things for like peanuts, right?
True.
Bring it up to San Diego, and guys would be like, a brand new block with like
Yeah.
1,200 miles on it? All right, yeah, no problem. I'll give you $1,000 for it. And he'd paid, I don't know, $100 for it.
Yeah, I did. I would buy those blocks. They were from Brazil. They were actually cast in Brazil, and they were being put into brand new taxis. Remember down in Tijuana, they had
Yeah.
those taxis.
Volkswagen taxis.
Volkswagen taxi. They
Yeah,
take
the
the
green and
passenger
white
seat out
ones.
in the front. You sat in the back. Yeah. Switcher Gears is saying that you guys ever seen Potter VW engines, Crazy Power? Check out his inline for Hemi, Sand, Dragster. In fact, I used to design a lot of the camshafts for Potter when I was at Crowler. And Potter and I became pretty good friends, and that's why he used to weld up my cases on the number 3 main. The number 3 is on the driver's side in the front. That's like the hottest one. That's the one you would always blow out, because where the oil cooler's at, it would blow hot air across that, then hit that number 3. So you would get a doghouse style, which would put it outside the airflow. Well, he would weld in on magnesium. He would weld on magnesium, and he would weld in supports back there so you wouldn't destroy the block.
Yeah,
Or the case
welding
of
magnesium takes some serious gonads,
Dude,
because if
for
you get it
real.
burning,
it's done.
it's done. You better just move out of that shop, because
Yeah,
it's not
done.
going to stop burning until it runs out.
Yeah, so
magnesium.
Potter, it's a good guy. And
Speaking of that Tijuana taxi thing, like you were talking about, that's what was in the 90s. Tijuana wasn't all that bad, right? Like
No.
you could go down there and have a good time, and
yeah.
it didn't cost you about $20-$30 that weekend.
The whole night for you and your friends, it was cheap.
Yeah, but we used to go down there and get pretty liquored up on Revolution Boulevard, right? And then you'd come back, and on your way back was where all the cool stuff happened. There would be a hot dog guy that had a hot dog cart, and they would be bacon wrapped hot dogs that were like perfect. You could smell the bacon for like 2 blocks away, right?
And you're like, that's where I'm going.
I gotta get me a bacon wrapped hot dog. As soon as you get done eating that sucker, you're like, oh man, well, I've already had 20,000 tequila sunrises. Let me see if there's some more food. And then what you run into is like, here's a guy, he's got like a pita bread sandwich, right? And he's got meat on a stick. Now, okay, most people sober would go, ew, meat on a stick, God, right? Coming back drunk, meat on a stick smells pretty damn good.
And it's transportable.
And it's good. It's really good. You get it in that little pita sandwich, and you freaking shave off whatever goat face is on there right into the pita sandwich, and you have a good time.
Yeah.
But yeah, great, dude.
Yeah. So I know all about Potter. Potter was he made a lot of the blocks that were billet aluminum, and they, instead of the cases actually coming apart, they would have main bearings in them, and they would bolt in. So yeah, he was an absolute genius when it came to Volkswagens. He had it nailed down.
Yeah. And then man, after you got done with your kebab, after you went through customs, then it was tacos at Jack in the Box. They had a Jack in the Box
Right
on
there.
the border.
Right there, like you came across, you came out. It was 15 steps, and there was a Jack in the Box right there.
And it was right next to the trolley station, right?
Yes,
So
literally.
it
So
was
you
like
could go there
perfectly built place.
Yep, exactly. And then you could be sitting at the trolley station waiting for the first trolley, which was at 5 a.m. I knew that. Everybody knew that. And so you're just sitting there,
Yep.
and then you would hear all the Marines coming across the border, getting into fights. And remember where you had to spiral up,
Oh yeah,
go across, spiral back down. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
it's good
Oh,
times,
those-
dude. Good
those are
times.
good
I remember taking that trolley back up to the ship, and literally the first trolley ran at 5 a.m.
Yeah.
and it would get you to the Navy base. Was like the 4th or 5th stop. It wasn't very far.
Yeah, Mario Logan.
For
yeah.
32nd Street, yeah. And then it would drop you right there, and you would literally walk on your ship perfectly timed, right as Liberty expired, and you had to go to work for that day. You'd just come back from Tijuana tearing it up,
Right. So true.
and you're full of Taco Bell and, I don't know, goat face sandwich and hot dogs with bacon wrapped around them.
Right. You know, I can't believe it's already 8:54.
I know.
Believe that?
Yeah, it's blown by. Blown by.
blown by. I'm actually going to go up here and I'm going to see if I can pull this up. I'm going to do a little share screen here. Actually, you know what? No, he's not even in the chats. I was going to see a bicycle guy. What's the
111?
bicycle guy? Yeah, 111. Is he? Have you seen him at all today?
I haven't
No?
seen him.
Oh, well, then you know what? I'll save this next one that I have here from Frank. I'll do a little bit more research on it, and that way I can actually give charts and graphs and whatnot, because he's actually really asking an awesome question about some intake manifolds, and there is a reason, and he is correct. He wants to know the science behind it, and I have the science behind it, so I can explain all that. So we'll do that. We'll do that next week. But remember, next week we're going to be doing a lot of the PRI stuff, and I know I keep talking about that because I'm excited. Because
I tell you what, bring some pictures and we'll share them up here of some of the
Yeah.
stuff that they're putting out.
I'm going to. I have the flyer. I actually have the release pamphlet. I'm going to scan it, and that way I can put them right up there on the
Dude,
screen.
you
and we
can
talk
probably just pull it right off their website, can't you? Once
I
they
know,
release
'cause
it.
this is all press release. This is all early release stuff.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah.
All right.
So this is the stuff that if you go to the show, you're going to get. I'm not sure if they're going to post it. I can ask that question because we have an engineering meeting on Friday. I can ask that if they'll have it. If not, that way you guys can look right along on it. But I could also just bring up another invite here, and I'll just have someone post it up or whatnot. So, but man, today's flown by. You got anything you want to plug?
I don't know. Keep tuned to Mr. Rotter's Neighborhood. I'm gonna start doing this, I think, as a full-time jobber until I find one. I'm gonna start doing stuff. I gotta get my head out of my butt and get out there and really get some ambition and start doing some things.
Yeah. It's funny that today is the first day that I felt like really good in a long time. So yeah.
Well, I'm gonna put the floor in that '63 Buick.
Oh,
Yeah, I cut the floor out of that Cadillac. I'm gonna graft it in that Buick.
yeah. See, keep on to make sure I didn't miss any chats. No.
Oh, Schweers and Gears says I was bicycle guy 111.
Oh, he was. Oh, okay. Well, I didn't know that. Well, I would have talked about it. We don't have enough time for that because we only got a few minutes left. So, I'll talk about it. But John Wilburn is bringing up. I always like to plug John Wilburn because he's an awesome guy. He's the bringer of the No Name Nationals. One of the reasons why we do a lot of this stuff is bring out this tech to you guys so you can make your shit faster. He has a Holloway themed live on his channel Friday. Bring your mask or costume to hang out. So John Wilburn on John Wilburn's channel at 7 p.m. Central time, which is still hard for me. I'm always used to saying Pacific time, but Central time. So yeah, go over and check out John Wilburn. It's going to be awesome.
Well, David James is saying he needs a VRS. Are they giving those away next week?
I don't know. Maybe I don't know.
Go to PRI and enter to win one.
Is that what it is? I think
I don't know.
I don't know.
just made that up. I
don't know.
don't think I'll be doing anything. I don't think I'll be doing anything at PRI this year. I won't even be there. I'm needing to get myself together, and get my my YouTube career instead of being a hobby. I need to freaking go all in on this thing.
Awesome. Well, Shrews and Gears said I recently changed my name. So perfect. Okay, so there it is. Good. Okay. Well, sorry about that, buddy.
I
Otherwise,
hadn't seen the bicycle guy for a while.
yeah, I hadn't seen him either, and I was like, man, he sent me this thing here, and this was on this was today on Wednesday, but then, I don't know.
All
No,
right.
it wasn't today.
Dust Devil says he needs 2 VRS carbs.
Yeah. Well, we're getting close to the end. So, what you have a new video? Oh, I want to talk about the video I just posted. You should really go check that one out because that took me a long time of editing to get that right. And
That's the thing I'm afraid of for doing this full time. Is like 4 hours worth of shooting the video and then in 4.5, 5 hours worth of editing the video
or more, because just getting it right and making sure that it flowed, and then going and look at the editing going, man, this sucks, going out there and retaping it. So what it is, it's how to find out what your camshaft is before you take it out of your engine. So if you get a mystery engine, you can figure out what the cam specs are while it's still in there, and I show you step by step by step. It's really simple. just take your time, do a lot of steps, don't rush it. Remember, finding zero on the piston's everything, because it all comes off of that. That's basically your mark. You have to know that, and I try to make it as fun as possible. And I'm still dissecting that slant six, and I wanted to know what camshaft was in it, so that's why I did it. Plus, Brian at Dust Owl Garage asked me, he's like, "Hey man, do you know how to do this? Is it possible?" I said, "What's funny is that I'm actually going to be doing a video about that this week." And he goes, "Really?" And I said, "Yeah." So I mentioned him a couple times in the video. So
well, you remember like maybe 2 years ago, I called you about doing this, and I had did it in a Buick 455. I was kind of warned. It was the 430. I was trying to determine what size cam, because I had an inkling that Wildcat 430 camshaft was something similar to a stage 1, because it had the single groove in the cam journal like a stage 1 did, and I thought this is gonna have the same profile. And then when I called you, you told me how to do it, and I set it. Remember, I set everything up.
Yeah.
And then when I was degreeing the cam, like trying to figure out what everything was, my dial indicator took a crap, and it started moving the shaft up and down without moving the dial indicator.
Yeah.
And I got like halfway through it, and I'm like, well, I know the intake side is exactly the same, but the exhaust side, all the numbers were all gooned up, and it didn't make any sense when I got done. I couldn't figure out what was going on.
Yeah.
It's a long, in-depth process of doing that.
It's really how I did it is it's pretty simple. You find zero, you find on the degree wheel, then you find your intake center lines, intake and exhaust. That gives you your lobe separation angle, and then my wheel is designed for that. Then I flip it over to the other side, which gives you our timing events. It's a two-sided degree wheel, and then I just do
stuff.
Well, it's really, anyone can have it. You
Mine's
can do
made
it
of
without
paper.
Huh?
Mine's made of paper. I'm kidding. I'm lying. We're out of here.
Yeah, we're out of here. All right, guys. It's 9:00. Thanks for stopping by. I appreciate everyone. And once again, slantdailygarage@yahoo.com. Send it over, and we'll get to it. I know I didn't get to the ones here because I was waiting for them to come in, but we'll talk about them. And then obviously go see Mr. Dallas, because now over there at Mr. Rotter's neighborhood, because he's going to be doing it for real now. Like, not just a hobby, but for real. So
yeah, well, until I pick up a job. So if you have the opportunity, get down to Tijuana and get yourself a goat face sandwich.
Right. All right, you guys take it easy. See you next week. All righty, we're out.